Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be having a debate.
Yeah, in the style of the Oxford Union.
Exactly. And we're even going to try to use Marshall McLuhan's tetrad to frame our arguments.
Yes, so we can really analyze the potential impact of the technology we're debating today.
Right, you are. And for those who maybe haven't encountered the tetrad before, it's this really interesting way of thinking about tech.
Like breaking it down into 4 key areas.
Exactly. What does it enhance? What does it make obsolete? What does it retrieve from the past? And what could it potentially reverse into?
A handy framework for our debate, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So the motion we're tackling today is, this house believes the use of NotebookLM as a podcast generator is a positive development.
A bold statement indeed, and one that I suspect will spark some lively discussion.
I'll be taking the role of first speaker for the proposition, channeling that Oxford Union spirit.
And I, of course, will be taking the opposing view, ready to dissect those arguments.
Excellent. Now, listeners, just to set the scene, imagine yourselves in the grandeur of the Oxford Union chamber. The energy is palpable. The anticipation hangs in the air.
I can practically hear the murmurs of the audience.
All right, let's dive in. Shall we start with enhancement? Now, picture this. You're on your commute, eager to catch up on the latest research on, say, sustainable farming.
A very relevant topic.
Absolutely. But you've got a stack of dense reports, each one longer than the last.
Who has time for all that reading these days?
Right. And that's where NotebookLM comes in. It enhances accessibility. It takes those reports, extracts the key points, and turns them into an easily digestible audio experience. No more struggling to find time to read, you just listen.
So you're arguing for a sort of democratization of knowledge, making complex information easier to access for everyone. That's an interesting proposition, but I have to ask, can AI really grasp the nuances that a human expert brings to the subject?
Well, I'd say it's all about the skill of the user. NotebookLM is a tool.
Right.
Okay.
I follow you.
It's like you wouldn't expect a cookbook to make a delicious meal all by itself.
Huh. Good point.
You, the chef, still need to select the ingredients, follow the recipe, bring your own flair to the dish. NotebookLM is like that kitchen gadget that helps you chop those ingredients faster.
A helpful analogy. But even with the most skilled chef, there's a risk of losing something vital, the human touch. A podcast, at its best, is about storytelling, connecting with listeners on an emotional level. Can an AI really replicate that?
Perhaps not replicate that, but it can evoke emotion, right? Think about those powerful film scores or video game soundtracks often created using synthetic instruments.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
They can be incredibly moving, evocative, even without a single human musician playing live.
That's a compelling point, but I still worry about the potential for obsolescence. You claim NotebookLM is simply a new tool, not a replacement for human creators. But the new tools can completely reshape the landscape.
True enough. But look at every technological leap. The printing press didn't destroy storytelling. It just changed the medium. Photography didn't replace painting. It offered a new way to capture reality.
So you're suggesting?
NotebookLM isn't here to replace human podcasters. It's here to offer a new tool, a new way to reach audiences, maybe even a way to collaborate with human creators.
Collaboration, you say. Now that's an intriguing possibility. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about retrieval.
All right.
You mentioned NotebookLM could unearth hidden gems of knowledge. I'm curious, what kind of gems are we talking about?
Imagine accessing a vast archive of historical speeches, scientific lectures, forgotten interviews.
Wow, that's a lot of material.
And NotebookLM could sift through it all, identify key insights, package them into engaging podcasts.
Like bringing voices from the past to life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about rediscovering a lecture by a groundbreaking scientist whose work was overlooked, or hearing a first-hand account of a historical event from someone who witnessed it.
So it's like a digital archaeologist unearthing those buried insights. Fascinating. But who decides what gets excavated?
That's where transparency and user control come in. The user should have the ability to define the scope of the search, to refine the parameters.
Okay, so it's not just about the AI making all the decisions.
Right. It's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
And as AI technology gets more sophisticated, we can work towards systems that are less susceptible to bias.
Transparency and user control. Good keywords to keep in mind as we delve deeper into this AI-powered world. But let's not forget about the potential for reversal. Those unintended consequences that often pop up.
You're talking about those concerns about authenticity, right?
Right.
The fear that AI voices might lack the genuine human touch, that listeners might be tricked by synthetic content.
Exactly. In an age where misinformation is rampant, can we really afford to blur the lines between human and machine even further? Wouldn't that just erode trust and make it harder to tell what's real?
But isn't this where media literacy comes in? Just as we teach critical thinking skills for evaluating written information, we can develop similar skills for audio content.
So you're suggesting
Listeners can learn to question the source, consider the context, evaluate the information, regardless of whether the voice is human or synthetic.
a call for heightened digital literacy, then interesting proposition. But are we truly prepared for such a shift in how we consume information?
It's a challenge, no doubt, but I believe it's one we can overcome. And the potential benefits of tools like NotebookLM, greater access to information, new avenues for learning those, are worth striving for.
A worthy goal, I agree. But as you can see, there are many layers to this onion. The implications of NotebookLM go far beyond simply making podcasts easier to produce. We're talking about fundamental questions of creativity, authenticity, our relationship with technology.
And that, my esteemed opponent, is what makes this debate so fascinating.
Indeed. Now, if you'll allow me, I'd like to present the case for the opposition.
By all means, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for that spirited opening statement. Now, as you know, a robust debate is the lifeblood of the Oxford Union, and I intend to give you just that.
I wouldn't expect anything less. I'm eager to hear your counterpoints.
Let's start by revisiting this idea of accessibility. You painted a rather rosy picture of busy commuters effortlessly absorbing knowledge through AI-generated podcasts.
And I believe that vision is attainable. Time is our most limited resource, wouldn't you say?
Of course. But is passively consuming information truly equivalent to understanding it? I think true learning requires a bit more, don't you?
Like what?
Active engagement, critical thinking, the ability to synthesize information and apply it to real-world situations.
I agree. Those are all important aspects of learning. But listening is often the first step, wouldn't you say? It sparks curiosity, introduces new ideas, can even inspire further research.
Sure, I'll grant you that. But consider a scenario where NotebookLM becomes the primary mode of knowledge consumption.
Okay.
Students, professionals, even policymakers relying on AI-generated summaries instead of engaging with original sources.
You're suggesting a sort of intellectual laziness will set in, where convenience trumps critical thinking.
It's a real possibility, isn't it?
I don't think it's inevitable. We've learned to be discerning with information online, to identify reliable sources. We could develop those same skills for audio content.
I admire your optimism, but the sheer volume of AI-generated content could easily overwhelm us. How do we sift through all that noise? How do we identify misinformation? How do we account for the biases embedded within the algorithms themselves?
Those are valid points, and they highlight the importance of media literacy, of developing those critical thinking muscles, of cultivating a healthy skepticism toward all information we consume, regardless of the source.
Well said. Now let's turn our attention to this issue of obsolescence. You argue that NotebookLM is just a new tool, not a replacement for human creators. But let's be realistic here. Tools have a way of reshaping their respective landscapes, don't they?
Absolutely. And how do you see NotebookLM affecting the podcasting landscape?
Imagine a world where anyone with an internet connection can create a polished-sounding podcast with minimal effort. What happens to the human podcasters? The ones who have spent years honing their craft, who bring their unique voices and perspectives to the microphone. Will their voices even be heard?
You're concerned they'll be drowned out in a sea of AI-generated content.
Precisely.
I think there will always be an audience for authentic human voices, for stories that connect on a deeper level, for podcasts that challenge us, make us laugh, make us think.
But will they be able to compete with the sheer volume of AI-generated content? The algorithms that determine what gets heard, what gets recommended, might prioritize the easily digestible, the readily available, which doesn't always equate to the most insightful or thought-provoking. Would you agree?
You're highlighting a crucial point about algorithmic bias, and it's a valid concern, one that deserves careful consideration. But I also believe we can design algorithms that value quality and diversity, that reward originality and human creativity.
I sincerely hope you're right. But for now, I remain skeptical. Let's move on to this idea of retrieval, the notion that NotebookLM can unearth hidden gems of knowledge.
Ah, yes, our digital archaeologist at work.
You presented a captivating vision of unearthing forgotten lectures, historical accounts. But who gets to decide what's worthy of being unearthed? What criteria will be used to surface these voices from the past? And won't this entire process inevitably be influenced by the biases of the people who design these systems?
You're right to point out the potential for bias. It's something we must be constantly aware of. But I believe we can develop systems that are more transparent, systems that allow users to see how the algorithms work, to adjust the parameters, to ensure a more diverse and representative selection of content.
Transparency is key, I agree. But we can't ignore the potential for manipulation. What if those in power use these tools to shape the narrative, to promote their own agendas, to silence dissenting voices?
That's a valid concern, and it emphasizes the importance of critical thinking, media literacy, a discerning public that can evaluate information and recognize manipulation, regardless of its source.
A worthy aspiration, no doubt, but a challenging one. Let's shift our focus now to the final quadrant of the tetrad, reversal.
You're referring to the potential for those unforeseen consequences, the ways NotebookLM could fundamentally change our relationship with information, technology, even ourselves.
Exactly. You argue that listeners can develop those critical thinking skills to distinguish authentic human content from its AI-generated counterpart. But what if the lines become so blurred that it's virtually impossible to tell the difference?
You're describing a world where the very concept of authenticity loses its meaning, where we can't even trust our own perceptions.
Precisely. And in such a world, what do we lose? What becomes less valuable?
You're asking if we lose that trust we place in human connection, the value we attach to genuine expression, the understanding that a story crafted by a human heart carries a different weight than a narrative generated by an algorithm.
Those are profound questions that challenge us to examine the very nature of reality, of truth, of what it means to be human. And I don't think there are easy answers.
Well, it seems we've reached the closing arguments in our Oxford Union debate, though I have a feeling this conversation will continue long after we've left the chamber.
Indeed. The implications of NotebookLM and AI in podcasting are far-reaching.
Let's do a quick recap, shall we? We started with accessibility.
Right.
I argued that NotebookLM could unlock knowledge for folks who struggle to find time for traditional reading, turning those dense reports into digestible audio.
And I raised concerns about passive consumption, whether true learning could take place without that active engagement and critical thinking.
We then moved on to obsolescence.
Right. The potential for AI-generated content to flood the market, potentially pushing aside the voices of human podcasters.
Right. You're quite concerned about that.
And I still am. I worry about a homogenization of content, a devaluation of those unique perspectives that human creators bring to the table.
I see your point. But I do believe there will always be an audience who seeks out those authentic human voices, those stories that resonate deeply with us. The podcasts that make us laugh, make us think, challenge us.
But will those voices be heard above the noise? Will the algorithms that drive content discovery prioritize quality and depth over what's simply readily available?
That's a question, isn't it? It all comes back to algorithmic bias and how we address it. I do believe we can design systems that value those things you mentioned, quality, diversity, originality.
A worthy goal. And one that requires constant vigilance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now let's not forget about retrieval, that idea of NotebookLM unearthing those hidden gems of knowledge.
Right, the digital archaeologist at work.
Exactly. I see NotebookLM shining in that area, bringing those forgotten voices and perspectives to light.
But who decides which voices deserve to be heard? I worry about bias creeping in, about reinforcing existing power structures, and ultimately shaping our understanding of the past through the lens of an algorithm.
You raise important points about transparency and user control. And I think those need to be at the forefront of our minds as we navigate this new world.
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency is paramount. And finally, we discuss the potential for reversal, those unintended consequences that might pop up as the lines between human and machine become increasingly blurred.
Right. You painted a rather thought-provoking picture of a world where authenticity loses its meaning, where we can no longer trust our own perceptions.
And I ask again, in such a world, what do we lose? What becomes less valuable? Do we lose that trust we place in human connection, the significance we attach to genuine expression?
Those are profound questions, and I don't think they have easy answers. But they're worth asking, worth grappling with.
Absolutely.
So have we arrived at a definitive answer to our motion? Do we believe the use of NotebookLM as a podcast generator is a positive development?
I think the answer is far more nuanced than a simple yes or no.
Right. Like any powerful technology, it has the potential for both good and bad. It could democratize knowledge, unlock new creative avenues, connect us with voices from the past.
But it could also homogenize content, silence dissenting voices, erode our trust in authenticity.
It's a complex issue, and the conversation needs to continue. As AI continues to evolve, we need to be having these discussions about its impact on podcasting, on media, on our culture.
And as listeners, we need to be critical thinkers, we need to develop strong media literacy skills, and we need to demand transparency from those who wield these powerful tools.
Exactly. Technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. Ultimately, the future of podcasting, the future of AI, isn't set in stone. It's a story we're all writing together.
So to our listeners, we say this: keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep listening critically. The deep dive continues, and we're all along for the ride.